welcome back. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my YouTube channel. Today I'm at the Lyon County State Fair. I was the judge this year for the photo competition, and I've done this for like 15 years off and on, and I really enjoy it, but I've always felt a little frustrated because when I do the photo competition, the participants don't have the benefit of hearing what I saw, how I'm evaluating it. So I thought it might be of interest to the viewers to see what judges look for when they're trying to judge a competition. And so I'm going to review some of those. It's so important that you prepare and plan ahead of time, because so oftentimes if you try and do stuff at the last minute, it's going to be sloppy. And I've also have some folks where they thought they had a beautiful print and they made it really big, it looked great, but then at the last minute they decided to go ahead and put it on a frame with a wraparound, where the image wraps around the sides of the frames rather than matted in the traditional sense. So what happened there, this was some years ago, beautiful prints. These people, they spent like, maybe $100 or more for each print. And they were beautiful, like 20 by 30, and they were great. And I think they're all from the local camera club, because like 3 different people, and they had the same style of mounting, and the texture of the paper and all was the same. So that's the year that I became very unpopular with the photography group in this part of Nevada, because those prints would have been great if they would have just matted them normally. But there were these beautiful wild Mustangs, these horses, and what happened when they made the prints and wrapped around the edges, the feet were under the bottom. The horses were too close to the edges, so that really destroyed it. They would have probably won all the awards in the show that year, but the way it was terrible because they just crowded it too much. So you want to plan ahead and don't wait till the last minute. Now, size doesn't matter, really. Judges look for quality, looking for impact, and so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the rules of composition. These aren't die-hard rules as such, they're just a guideline. So when doing a photograph, you want to place your subject in not the center all the time, except if it's a portrait or some certain thing, but primarily you want to shift your subject off center. And one of the things you do, just imagine if you drew lines, divided this into thirds, horizontal and vertical. And where those lines intersect, there's 4 points here, and somewhere in those areas is an ideal place to place your subject. And that's really ideal. But of course, you can change it a little bit. But when you do that, say if you have a runner or a tractor, anything that's implied motion, if it's moving, you don't want to have your subject here and facing that way. It creates a tension. There's a lot of psychology that goes into photography, and we're going to talk about that dynamic tension and stuff. So instead of facing that way, you'd want the person to be here facing that way. It's more comfortable for the viewer because it looks like the subject is moving into the space rather than off the edge of the frame. So keep that in mind. Another thing is when something is a vertical shot, if it's falling, the same thing applies. You don't want to have, let's say it's a feather and it's falling. This is just an example. You don't want to have it at the very bottom like it's falling out of the bottom of the frame. Put it a little above center. Again, it's more comfortable viewing because it has space to move into. And another example here, a tractor. You see there's a little more space on the right side than the left side. That's the direction that the tractor is going. So keep that in mind. Give it a little room there. I'm always looking for impact. Most judges, like I used to judge a lot of international competitions. In those days, we were using slides and a slide projector, 80 slides and a carousel. And I would go through boom, 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 very, very fast. The first time through, 80 slides, and I'd probably have the top 3 in just a couple minutes, just run right through real quick. Because those have impact. It's colorful maybe, it's got a good central subject, and it's sharp, and you look at it and you go, wow. Well, when you see something like that, it's usually because that image confirms with the rules of composition, or the guidelines. It's comfortable viewing, it's got a good central subject, and maybe it's colorful, and so that's what we're looking for. Simplicity and impact is a big, big thing. So this is one of the displays that I've had this year. They've been after me for years to put up some of my work rather than just judging, and so this year I decide to go ahead and put up some stuff. So we'll look at some of these a little later because I'm using these really unique mounts, and that's one thing I want you all to consider using. These are featherweight, just a few ounces, and I'm going to do a video about these, how to use them and how to prepare and mount your prints on here. Really very inexpensive and super quality, and we have the fortune of a local printer here. There's a company, it's Eagle Ship and Print right here in Yerington, Nevada. And so I'll leave that information at the back. I don't get anything out of it. They're just a wonderful group of people, and they do great work, as you can see. And you can send them your digital images over the internet. They'll print them up and they can ship them right out to you. And they're going to be carrying these mounts too, I believe. So that's hard to find these things, but they're just great. They're so light. And I can stack 10 of these in a little box. And they're, like I said, very, very lightweight. So consider getting some of these mounts. I want to talk a little bit more about some tips on composition, how to add a little impact to your images. And I like to see pictures that have depth. And a couple ways to do that. Once, if you have a central subject, I'm going to show you a picture later in a moment here about this building. It's the old historical fish hatchery up at Mount Whitney. And I took a picture of the building, but I framed it with these tree branches and some interesting foreground. I got the reflection. So it looks really nice. So rather than just a straight shot with no framing, it wouldn't have been nearly as interesting. But with that framing, it adds a lot. A couple other things you might want to do. Look for leading lines that will guide the viewer into the picture. Hopefully you'll have an interesting subject at the end of that line. It could be a fence diminishing with the distance, railroad track, something like that. Look for some way to guide the viewer into your frame. Look for S-curves like roads or rivers that are curving around. That's another good way. Those S-curves are really a powerful way of doing it. And so look for that. Have your images in focus, of course, if you can. There's some exceptions, though. One of the very famous photographers from Austria, his name is Haas, and he took pictures a lot for National Geographic, and he would take real long exposures of bullfights, and the colors and the action would be beautiful, not in focus, of course, because everything was blurred, but they were just magnificent. So it's something to play around with, but by and large, you want your images really sharp, well composed, and with an interesting subject. One of the things that I see a lot is, one, possibly not a central subject, or there's just too much garbage in the picture, and you don't know what it's a picture of. I was stationed in Saudi Arabia as a photojournalist there for many years, and Kenya was very close to where we were living, so I was giving tours down to Kenya through a lot of the embassies in Saudi Arabia, and we go down and the folks would take pictures, and their idea was they wanted a wide-angle lens and take a picture of everything. And you look at the image, and in one corner there's Maasai jumping up, and there's rhinos fighting over here, and you've got lions here, and birds flying through the sky, and you look at it just so busy, you say, what is this a picture of? You know, so that might be okay occasionally, but try to find an interesting subject. Better to take 3 or 4 shots of something like that rather than trying to get the whole world in one picture. So look for a strong central subject. And colorful images, just a colorful sunset is not necessarily a good picture. Back in the old days, a lot of the film producers, they would have a blue filter, and they would hold that up to check the scene, the composition, and that would eliminate the color. Everything would be blue and gray. And so it won't be influenced by the color so much. And a lot of people just get so hung up, they say, oh, it's spectacular colors, but it's a really crummy picture. So give that some thought. Another thing is the positioning of your horizon. Normally you don't want the picture with the horizon right dead center. Ask yourself, okay, where do I want that horizon? Is the sky really beautiful and important, or is the foreground really important and really nice? So that will tell you, do you want to shift it up more or down? So one of the beautiful images that we had in this competition was a very interesting aerial shot. Nice, interesting foreground, these fields, the detail, the color was spectacular, but all that interesting stuff was at the bottom third of the frame, and all this rest is just blank blue sky up here. So if that would have been shifted to show the interesting stuff, give that predominance, and let the blue sky just kind of complement it. So keep that in mind. And of course, when you're having the position of the horizon, you don't want it crooked. Of course, you want to keep that level. And most of these digital SLR cameras, they have a built-in leveling device. And if you don't know about that, check your owner's manual, because just about every camera has that. And it's a real good guide. Get that settled. I work on a tripod a lot, so it's a lot easier, but just be sure to get that horizon level. Okay, so now let's take a closer look at some of the images that will illustrate some of those points we were talking about for composition and some leading lines, that sort of thing. So the first picture we're going to look at is the tractor, where we have a little space in front of the tractor to move into. And remember that if it's something moving, it's implied motion, even though it's a still picture, so you want to give it a little more space. It looked kind of goofy if that tractor was way off in the far frame. And now the other image we're going to look at is something I would like to encourage you to do, and it's something I learned from the old Dutch masters way back in the day. I wasn't around them, but I learned from them reading the books and all. And that's, you can add impact to your images by setting colors, warm colors against cool colors, or dark against light, and create these patterns. And it really makes the image jump out sometimes. So we're going to take a look at that in this beautiful sunrise shot that I just shot not too long ago, just a few miles away here at the old Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area. Okay, and an example of good framing. I told you before about adding depth by adding some framing around your subject. Rather than just a building, a structure out there in the middle of nowhere, it could look great, everything could be perfect. But when you add a little branch over the top, some foreground, interesting, kind of frame it a little bit. So we'll take a look at the historic Mount Whitney Fish Hatchery. And this was a picture I did for the Sierra Heritage Magazine. It was a story I did about the hatchery area there. Now we'll take a look at this picture that I love because I'm a wide-angle junkie. I use wide-angle lenses. And my good friend Stuart Skalka just gave me a 15mm lens, a Leica, awesome lens. Infinity is 2.5 feet. So I'll give you an idea how wide that is. You can set it at 2.5 feet, and everything from like a foot to infinity is in focus. So a wonderful optical lens. But I like to use that wide-angle lens when I have an interesting subject in the foreground. Not necessarily something big, but just in this case, it was onions. I'm doing a story for Nevada Magazine about Mason Valley and the agricultural heartland of Nevada. So rather than just stacks of onions, which is a very common thing to do, and I've done that and it looks great, but this was a little different shot. I went ahead and I had the rows of onions. I had it backlit, I mean the onion bags, I had it backlit so it'd be fairly dark. I want to underexpose it, but I opened the front bag, took a few onions out, set them on top, opened it up. So now it tells a story. You can see what's in the bags. It's a lot more interesting. I like to try to do that whenever you can do an image that tells a story a little bit, or people ask, oh wow, that's kind of interesting, or now I understand what's in those bags. That adds a lot to it, and the viewer appreciates that. So I use a wide-angle lens. I get very close, stop down a little bit, and I don't care if the background's a little out of focus, but the foreground's got to be sharp as a tack because that's my subject. And my good friend Roberta Bryant, she held a reflector, shine that light in, because remember the sun is coming behind the onions, and I wanted to just light up, illuminate the foreground, and let the rest of it go fairly dark, and I didn't care if the background's sharp or not. So I hope you like it. Again, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. And don't forget, stay focused.
That's a wrap.